Welcome to the editorial board session. Please identify yourself and tell us the position you're running for, and then give us a little background, little personal history.
Sure. I'm Raymond Rodrigues. I'm running for the Florida State House, District 76. I work at Florida Gulf Coast University as a budget manager in the College of Arts and Sciences. Prior to that, I spent a decade working for GE Corporate. In the last 3 years, I was a manager in their international trade program. So I think I have a very good perspective on both the public and private sectors, which would be an advantage in the state legislature. I'm the vice chair of the Lee County Republican Party. I live in the district and have been in the district for the last 18 years and have a long record of community service here in Lee County. And I look at this as an opportunity to continue to serve.
And you've run for elected office before?
Yes, I have. In 2004, I ran for supervisor of elections in Lee County. In 2006, I ran for the Stony Brook Community Development District. And then in 2008, I ran for school board in Lee County.
Could you tell us, just summarize a little bit of those other community activities? And I don't know how you squeeze in so much stuff in a day, but can you go over some of the other stuff?
Sure. I've been active. I'll start with the Lee County Republican Party. I currently serve as the vice chair, and I've done that since 2010. I've been active with the party since I moved to Lee County in 1994. In addition to the Republican Party, I'm active with a group called Special Equestrians. I've served on their board of directors and currently serve on their board of advisors. That's a partner agency with the Lee County United Way. I've also served on a board, a nonprofit board. It's the Freedom and Virtue Institute.
Freedom and Virtue?
Yes, and I served as a director for 3 years there and was a treasurer during one of my years.
What does that organization do?
They're an advocate for returning government back to the vision of our founding fathers. And so Ishmael Hernandez is the executive director of that organization and is an effective spokesperson for that. One of the programs they've initiated is generally in fall you'll see organizations that give out backpacks. He's gone into, partnered with a school to build an opportunity for students to earn money over the course of the year so that in the following year they can use those funds to purchase their own. So it's really a self-reliance is what the project's called, and that's the type of things the organization works toward.
Great.
In the past, I've served in our court system as a guardian ad litem, and when I worked at GE, I was our partnership coordinator with Michigan Elementary in a Partners in Education program where we brought GE employees into the school to serve as tutors and mentors to the kids there.
Great.
So those are some of the things I've done on a volunteer basis.
And you came here in 1994 from where?
Brunswick, Georgia. That's where I was raised.
You are on the Stony Brook Community Development District Board of Directors, Advisors?
Board of Supervisors.
Supervisors.
Is what it's called. Yes.
How does that work? Do you have to, you can still be a serving member while running for another office?
I had to submit my resign to run letter.
Okay.
That was due last week.
Okay.
And so my term will end no matter what happens here, November 6th.
November 6th. Okay.
Community Development District, yes.
What does a supervisor do
For
the Stony Brook Community Development? What
Are you familiar with community development districts?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we have a number of them in Collier County, and it's my understanding that each one's a little different because they have their own, not charter, their own rules.
Each one is a little different. What makes Stony Brook unique among community development districts is that we also have a golf course.
Yeah.
Lennar had a business model in the late 90s where they put in a golf course, and in a typical community, when you purchase your home, you purchase a membership in the golf course. What Lennar did on 3 developments, and Stony Brook was the last of those developments, was they put in a golf course, but it was completely separate from the homeowners. So that allowed the homes and the sites to be sold for less than they would have been. The theory being the golf course would be a public course, open 7 days a week to the public, and it would be self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it turned over, when Lennar turned over to the residents, we got the CDD and the golf course as well. And so we do both of those things. Primarily, most of our time is engaged with golf course issues because the CDD itself, once you've got your bond schedule set up and your assessments made and your taxes levied, it takes care of itself. The one big action we did on the CDD side was we refinanced our bonds not long after I came on board and got a better rate, and we were able to lower our tax rate as a result of that.
Which is another reason to set up a community development district, is to sell bonds.
Exactly, because the developers get the opportunity not just to bond it, but to bond it as a municipality, which are tax-free. That's the big advantage to establishing a CDD.
Ray, what is it about this office at this time? You've sought other offices, there are other offices available, you're a grassroots kind of guy. Why this job?
Well, we mentioned earlier that I'd run for supervisor of elections and I'd run for school board. And I'm a big believer in learning, and the biggest lesson I learned from those races is it's a mistake to run against an incumbent in a county that elects at large and has a geographic area larger than the state of Rhode Island and a population greater than the state of Wyoming. And so I'm interested in serving, and the state house race offers up a number of opportunities. One, I look at what's happening in our state, and I think there are things we could be doing better. Specifically, I think we need to work on diversifying our state economy. I think we need to work on improving the environment for private sector job creation. There are things that the state needs to do to make government more open and transparent, and I think we need to take steps to protect our environment. And those are things that can be done on a state level. So this is an opportunity to run in an open seat, specifically for a district, which gives me the opportunity to be a grassroots candidate and go door to door and actually reach the entire district to communicate my message. And that's the attraction for me.
Always interested when somebody says to make government more open and transparent.
Sure.
Can you have some specifics?
Absolutely.
What do you have in mind when you make that statement?
2 years ago, the Florida State Supreme Court upheld a decision that had been issued by an appellate court out of Escambia County that held that public agencies do not have to provide the opportunity for public comment.
Mm-hmm.
They merely have to notice the meeting, and then they have fulfilled the sunshine statutes. We mentioned that I grew up in Georgia. I'm from Florida. I was born in Florida. As a child of the South, there was a saying I heard quite frequently growing up, which is children are to be seen and not heard. And I think it's appalling that the official position of the Florida Supreme Court is that taxpayers are to be treated like children. We can be seen at these meetings but not heard. So I think we should pass legislation that would guarantee the public the opportunity to offer comment on agenda items. I know as a supervisor on the CDD, some of our best suggestions have come during public comment from the audience.
A bill along those lines cleared the House and got hung up somewhere, apparently.
It cleared the Senate. It did not clear the House.
Did not clear the House. Okay. But you'd be a proponent of it.
Absolutely, and I think one of the reasons it may not have cleared the House is there was not a Republican sponsor. That bill on the House side was sponsored by a Democrat, and it didn't get anywhere in that legislature, in that House. And I think a Republican sponsor may advance the ball a little farther than the minority party could.
You also were a member of the Lee County Housing Authority.
Yes.
And that was an appointment by Governor Bush?
Yes, Governor Jeb Bush appointed me there.
So you've been very involved in local, well, you've already gone over your community service
Yes.
list, but also in politics. You've been with the Republican Executive Committee for as long as you've been in Lee County?
18
basically?
years, yes.
Okay.
And the term on the Housing Authority was very interesting. It was an opportunity to come in and see how public housing works in Lee County. And when I started, we had 4 developments. 3 of them were breaking even. One was losing money and was never going to, we investigated it, determined it was never going to be in a position where it could even break even. It was a facility out on the Lee County, Hendry County line.
Ooh.
Which was a terrible place to locate public housing because there's no existing infrastructure. And so we were having trouble getting tenants in the building, in the facility, and tenants that were there didn't want to be there, so we had a higher crime rate there than we had anywhere else. And so during my last year, we actually privatized that development, convinced Housing and Urban Development to allow us to shut it down. And we tturned it over to 6 LSUs for migrant housing, where it's much more it's utilized much better on that by them for that purpose than it was being used for us. And so when I left, the Housing Authority was in a position where budget-wise it was in much better shape, and mission-wise we'd refined our mission down to the people, the real target segment for those that needed public housing.
You list your activity as a volunteer with the Estero Council of Community Leaders.
Yes.
That's a very effective and well-informed and networked organization. Will they be working for you?
That remains to be seen. I have an interview scheduled with them next month. They interview candidates to discuss with them their views on various issues. I suspect I will have help, at least from individuals that I work with in the organization, whether the organization chooses to get involved with the campaign or not. My community, Stony Brook, is a member of the Estero Council of Community Leaders. It's one of the gated communities, and so I volunteered through that organization.
Have they decided yet how they're going to succeed Don Eslick?
They're working on that. They've had meetings to put together their succession plans over the last couple of months.
It's going to be several people.
Don missed his first meeting a month before last, and it was unusual having an ECCL meeting without Don.
Mm-hmm.
It was noticeable.
How are you campaigning? You're knocking on doors?
Yes, I am. We are going door to door to Republican super voters and taking the message directly to them.
What are they telling you? What's the voter telling
Right.
You know, the interesting thing is the most comments I receive are on federal issues and specifically on spending. People are really upset with the level of spending by our federal government. When we discuss state issues, jobs are the number one concern, jobs in the economy.
On your brochure, it talks about stimulating job creation through economic diversification.
Yes.
How does a state rep tackle something like that?
Good question. And I think there are a number of opportunities. The areas that I think we could diversify our economy and do better would include, I'll start with manufacturing. Historically, Florida has not had a significant amount of manufacturing. Our manufacturing output's a third less than our neighboring states. And part of the reason for that, I think, is if you look at our tax structure, we're the only state that levies a tangible personal property tax on businesses, which particularly hits manufacturers hard because they're heavily invested in plant and equipment. The legislature's taken the first step in that by putting a constitutional amendment to increase the exemption.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to go to the next step and eliminate that tax altogether. Another thing we could do, and this was a recommendation by Florida Tax Watch, was to improve our qualified targeted industry list on manufacturing so that we have better incentives and more timely incentives. Currently, I think it's set up for large manufacturing, and that could be improved by making it more applicable to small manufacturing. I drove by Arthrex on the way in here for my interview, and they're a success story that proves clean, light manufacturing can be done and be done well down here. I think that's one area we could do as far as taxation and the qualified target industry. Two other examples. I think global trade and logistics is an opportunity. According to Florida Trend, only 55% of the imports that are used in Florida come through our seaport. The rest of them come in through another seaport and they get trucked in. Of the goods that are manufactured in Florida, only 75% are exported from a Florida seaport. The rest get trucked out and exported somewhere else. So if we could just increase the use of our own seaports, there's real opportunities there. And those are jobs that pay well. Manufacturing is 122% of the state average, and global trade and logistics is a third higher than the state average wage.
How would we do that? I mean, that's one of Governor Scott's big initiatives.
Sure.
Is to improve the ports. Does it take money to improve them, or is there
There's
state policy that has to change, laws that have to change?
It does take funding to improve the ports, and he has prioritized seaport development. And as a legislator, I would support that effort because I think that bodes well for our state down the road in economic diversification. We could also add global trade and logistics to the qualified targeted industry list. It's not currently on there. That's something the state legislature could do. And then the last thing, and this is important as well, I think Florida should follow the example of North Carolina. Decades ago, they had a situation where their economy was based on textiles and tobacco, and it was a very up and down economy. And they made the decision to invest in higher education. They created Research Triangle out of that. And if you look at the North Carolina economy, no matter what the national economy is doing, it is pretty steady. We could do the same thing here in Florida. The new Florida initiative has been proposed by Chancellor Brogan. It's been endorsed by the Florida Chamber. It'd be about $1.5 billion investment over a 5-year period in higher education, specifically towards science, technology, engineering, and math, because that's where innovation will occur, new technology, and new startups. We've seen that work on a small level. At UCF, they have a job incubator program there, which largely feeds off their research. It's created 140 startup companies. They employ 1,600 people. They brought in $190 million in private investment, which is the key to the whole thing. And the average wage is $70,000. So as a state legislator, I would encourage us to follow that example and invest in the new Florida Initiative program for our state.
Could you go back just one step to, you talked about stepping up global trade and increase the use of our seaports. I understand the goal, but how do you go about increasing the use of our seaports?
One thing we could do is to follow the governor's recommendation
Okay.
for seaport investment.
Okay.
We need to increase our capacity.
You
That's
mean
part
the,
of the.
you mean the depth?
Well, depth is one thing, because the reason depth will be important is they're widening the Panama Canal,
Right.
which is going to bring in super tankers, which will need deeper ports to accommodate those ships.
Right.
So depth is very important. But an investment in the infrastructure of our ports is also important to increase capacity. Those are the two things that we could do.
Okay, thank you.
How do the ports figure into Southwest Florida? Are any of these
Well, we wouldn't get,
seaports?
on this side of the coast, we wouldn't see that. That's primarily
Until you
going to
get
be
to
the East Coast. Correct. What I think we would see in Southwest Florida is the opportunity for distribution centers and logistics. And that's the area where I think we're going to get the bang for the buck in Southwest Florida.
Can I run down a couple, or 2 or 3 other state issues that we've been asking all the candidates
Sure.
about, just to get your thoughts on? The first, gambling. There's going to be apparently in the November ballot a question on whether to open up the Bonita Springs dog track to slot machines. But no matter how that vote goes, the fact is the change can only happen when it's happens up in Tallahassee.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on gambling as an industry and possible expansion in Florida?
I am not a fan of expanding gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think those are the high-wage, high-tech jobs we need to diversify our state economy. The district that I'm running to represent is heavily dependent on tourism, and what I've heard from business owners is they don't think gambling is compatible with the family environment that we've built here in Southwest Florida and our coastal areas.
But what about the dog track?
I don't think they see the dog track as true competition. I think a destination casino, which is what dominated the Lee County discussion, is viewed as competition.
Along with being a tourist area, how about offshore drilling?
I'm not a proponent of offshore drilling. I think it's fine as long as you stay outside of the military zone, which I believe is 125 miles.
Which is what
Yeah.
it currently is, correct?
Correct. I support our current boundaries. I do not support bringing it beyond that. For a couple, one, if you look at state waters, I don't think there's enough oil in state waters to justify the risk. When they looked at doing this a few years ago, Senate President Atwater commissioned a geological survey, and they found within state waters there's enough oil to supply the U.S. need for a week. So I don't think the risk is worth the reward on state waters. When you get between state waters and the military zone, I think it's short-sighted to take that territory away from our military, who use it to train, and it's the only area that closely resembles the Persian Gulf. And so I think we've always got to have a military that is ready to be able to engage in the Persian Gulf as long as radical Islam remains a threat.
Immigration is more of a federal issue, at least in theory, but there have been some states who are critical of Congress have said that they haven't stepped up to address a problem. Arizona, some other states. Florida hasn't gone that way as a state. Is there anything that, any thoughts you have on the current immigration policy in the U.S. and how it affects Florida that would be something you'd want to address in Tallahassee?
Well, I think immigration is a federal issue, so we should be encouraging our federal congressional delegation to solve that problem in D.C. From a state level, I do think there are steps that we could take here. Trudy Williams, the person who held this seat before and his term limited out, had filed a bill that would take criminal offenders. Currently, I think violent offenders are sent back. It would take the non-violent offenders, the ones that are left, and it would deport them after they've served half their sentence. And then if they were to come back and commit another crime, it would double their sentence. And so I think those are areas we can look at for sure. The sentiment I get as I go door to door is people are not happy with folks that come here illegally and then utilize government benefits. And we're in a tight economic environment. That's definitely something that needs to be examined.
Besides redistricting, one of the topics that took up the last legislative session was education, and the session before that, and quite likely sessions to come.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts on the current state of state funding for education? Are more dollars needed? You've touched on the university system, but my question is more towards K through 12.
Sure. I think, I'm not sure the solution to the problem is just throwing money at it. Let me start there. But I definitely do not believe the solution is to continue to cut education, which is what we saw session before last, where they took $1 billion out. They added it back, but that just restored us to where we were. I do think we passed some good legislation as far as accountability measures that have been put into place. I think we need to see how that works when it takes effect. You know, we're implementing that now. I'd like to see what the results of that are before we tee up major initiatives beyond that.
Tax relief, you talked about the tangible, intangible personal property tax and some changes there, but it's also on your brochure that tax relief.
Yes.
What else are you talking about with tax relief?
Well, the tangible personal property tax was the one I was addressing at the time I prepared my brochure. It was before the session began, and they had not put that on the ballot for reduction. But that's clearly a job killer for a tax, and it needs to go away.
Anything else?
Yes, I would just say that I think it's important to have someone, to have delegation in the state legislature that understands that what's happening and what's important goes beyond the boundaries of the district. It even goes beyond the boundaries of the county. I believe that a regional approach is an appropriate one. I remember State Representative Davis advocated for that, and for a period of time we, through his leadership, had a gathering at Florida Gulf Coast University of our regional delegation that would then identify areas where they could work together and pursue that in the legislature. I'd like to see that return because I think it's appropriate. A rising tide lifts all ships, and when something good happens in Collier, Lee benefits. I think when something good in Lee happens, Collier benefits. And so I'm interested in that. I believe I can work with our delegation. I've gotten support from Representative Caldwell in Lee County and from Representative Pasadoma in Collier County. And I think we have a delegation that would be interested in that, and that's something I would like to initiate if I'm elected.
You worked on State Rep Caldwell's campaign, correct?
Yes. I was
A successful campaign?
Yes.
What'd you learn?
Primarily that if you work hard and go door to door, it will pay off in the end. It's the difference between a state legislative race and in Lee County at least, a county commission or school board or constitutional race, is that instead of having to reach 600,000 people, you only have to reach 150,000 because they're a much smaller district, which gives you the ability to go door to door and to work grassroots. And Representative Caldwell did that. It worked, and I'm doing that as well in this campaign.
He's come a long way.
Yes.
He's really grown into the job, hasn't he?
I think so. He was young when he was elected, and he has matured a great deal.
Well, you helped him with his campaign. Who's helping you? Who are your advisors, lieutenants, volunteers?
Sure. I have over 50 volunteers who have already donated over 700 hours into my campaign. My campaign manager is Terry Miller, who is also Matt's campaign manager, and he serves as State Representative Aubuchon's congressional campaign manager as well. So
Want
I've
the
got
job done, give it to a busy guy. Right?
exactly, or someone that knows how to do it. And so I've got Terry, he's my hands-on campaign manager, and then as I said, we've got 50 volunteers, and I rotate. A number of them have stepped up to rotate and helping me in my door-to-door. And so we have volunteers that have taken specific days that are assisting me with that.
We've got about just over a minute left, and I just wanted to give you some time to any other issue on the state level that we haven't asked you about that you feel very adamant about that you'd like to tell us about.
You've hit the main ones and allowed me to go over what my platform is, so
Okay.
we were able to address what I view as the key issues. The one thing I would end with is this. I think we need to be focused on protecting our environment. We have not been funding Florida Forever. We gave it $15 million in the current session. Previous to it, didn't get funded at all. And part of that is because of the budget crisis. I think we can identify a way to do this. The bonds for Governor Martinez program, P2000, are going to be paid off in 2013. That's $250 million, which will be available, and I would like to see that go towards our environmental preservation program.
What revenue pays off those bonds?
I would have to look into that.
Well, we thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank
Thanks. Good luck with the race.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
See you
for coming
again.
here.
It's good to see you.